Bhakata Shuddha Bhakata Charana Renu Bhajanayanu Kula Bhakata Bhakat Seva Param Siddhi Premalati Karamula Bhakata Seva Param Siddhi Bhakata Seva Param Siddhi Premalati Karamula Bhakata Seva Param Siddhi Premalati Karamula Madhavati Thi Bhakti Janani Jatane Palana Kori Madhavati Thi Krishna Basati Basati Boli Paramaya Darbori Krishna Basati Basati Boli Paramaya Darbori Krishna Basati Basati Boli Paramaya Darbori Gaura Amara Sabastane Korala Brahmana Range Gaura Amara Sabastane Gaura Amara Sabastane Korala Brahmana Sabastana Heri Bhami Pranay Bhagata Sanghe Heri Bhami Se Sabastana Heri Bhami Pranay Bhagata Sanghe Nirganga Bhadya Sunite Mana Abhasara Sadarache Nirganga Bhadya Nirganga Bhadya Sunite Mana Abhasara Sadarache Yugala Murti Beti Amora Paramayananda Oya Yugala Murti Prasada Seva Korite Hoya Sakala Prapancha Jaya Prasada Seva Korite Hoya Sakala Prapancha Jaya जी है भजन देखी जीवत गोलोका माया जी है चरण सिद्धू देखिया गंगा सुतन सिंह पाया चरण सिद्धू देखिया गंगा सुखन सिंह पाया तुलसी देखी चुराया प्राणा माधव तो संजानी तुलसी देखी गौरविता शेख से बने जीवन सार्थक माने गौरपिया सख से बने जीवन सार्थक माने Bhakti Vinoda Krishna Bhajane Anakula Paraja Bhakti Vinoda Prati Divase Param Sukhe Sikara Torayata Prati Divase Param Sukhe Svikara Koroyata Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, Vaishnava Thakur, Vaishnava Thakur, Jaya Vaishnava Thakur. Jai Nitai, Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Shri Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvekam Savadutam Vijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna. So thank you so much everyone for coming. Really happy to be with you this morning. And today we're continuing talking about the triggers of transformation. It was a beautiful day yesterday. We heard so much about Vrindavan. In the morning I talked about the 6 things that happen in Vrindavan. First there's Dan, and then there's Man. So you heard about Dan and Man. Then I said there's Hori and there's Chori. So you heard both also. And then I said there's Ras and also Vilas. So we had a full darshan of Vrindavan yesterday by the grace of our wonderful speakers. And today we're continuing discussing our journey towards Vrindavan and what may trigger us on the journey, what can push us forward, what can help us to make our way through the chaos of the world. They say when you're walking through chaos, just keep walking. So we're walking through this material world. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said there's no place for a gentleman or gentle lady. So we don't want to become entangled or enamored or distracted or deviated by the things of this world. How do we remain progressively moving our heart towards Krishna? Of course, yesterday I didn't mention this. We often talk about transformation, but actually we're not transforming into anything new. Rather, our acharyas teach us, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhya Kabunoi Shravanadi Sudachite Kareye Udoy. That love for Krishna is already established within the heart. And therefore all we're doing is awakening that by the process of Krishna consciousness. Socrates was an incredible teacher, but he said something very nice in one of his works. He said, all I see myself as is a midwife. He says, I don't actually feel I'm giving anyone anything. Actually, just like a midwife, they know the baby is already there. And my job is only to bring it out. So a preacher of Krishna consciousness actually remains very, very humble, because they know that the knowledge which I'm giving comes from a higher source way beyond my intelligence. And what I'm actually trying to awaken already exists within the person that I'm speaking to. So what am I really? I'm just an insignificant connector in the whole thing. The knowledge goes beyond me. What I'm awakening is already there. All I'm simply doing is making the connection. So Srila Prabhupada was this perfect via medium and following in the footsteps of all the acharyas. But we talked yesterday about the email, the doubt that the devotee had. Thank you to all of you who reached out to me to offer this devotee help. I'll tell him, come to Golokadam, you'll find many friends. But we all have those doubts, and we heard about how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says one who has doubts, that's the most agonizing, because we've come so far. We're basically there on the final lap of Krishna consciousness after 8.4 million species of life. Manushanam, we've got this human form, such a great opportunity. So how do we overcome those doubts? We talked yesterday about how the transformation we're looking for is ultimately to make the heart soft, so that we can become more sensitive to all these beautiful spiritual stimuli that are heading our way. But unless we become soft-hearted, unless we become rasika, unless we become connoisseurs, so much may be given to us, but we will not be able to taste. And therefore Srila Prabhupada very beautifully tells us that this Vedi Bhakti, teaching us the philosophy that Rupa Goswami so beautifully delivered, this Vedi Bhakti, Nitya Siddhasya Bhavasya, has the potentiality to awaken Bhav. So in answer to our devotee who had doubts about whether any transformation is taking place for him, or for that matter anyone in the Krishna consciousness movement, we said, number one, be peaceful, because there are stages of transformation. It takes time, it takes enthusiasm, it takes patience as well, and determination. And be peaceful, because understand that you are on this process, and nobody in the room can say they haven't been transformed. Because even if you feel, after so many years my heart hasn't changed, yes, but maybe your behavior has changed, maybe your goals have changed, maybe your intentions have changed, maybe your actions have changed, and maybe you're no longer completely covered, but you have awakened some aspect. So you're on the journey. So be peaceful. Transformation is happening. And then we said be grateful, because you may look at a certain aspect of your character and feel, no, not transformed. Character, still very, very envious. Yes, but there are so many other ways in which you have transformed. And so for each individual, as we go through the process of transformation, it will occur in different ways. Some of us will struggle with certain aspects more than others. But eventually, for all of us, by the promise of our acharyas, by this process, prema will arise. And until we have that prema, very, very poor. That's what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says. Prema dhana vina vyartha daridra jivan dasa kori vetan more deha prema dhan. He says, if I don't have prema, then I must be considered a very impoverished living being. Therefore, Krishna, make me your servant and give me that prema as my salary. So this is our highest objective, our highest desire, to have this love. As Hari Parshad Prabhu reminded us, don't desire to go back to Godhead. Still digesting that one. Work in progress. And then we said, on this journey to our devotee, be peaceful, you're in the process, be grateful. It's happened in many different ways which you may not directly see, but be hopeful, because there are many triggers. When we turn to the Bhagavatam, we keep the Bhagavatam as our constant companion. That's what Sanatana Goswami said. Madaika bandhu, mat sangin, mad guru, man mahadhana. He said, keep the Bhagavatam as your best friend. Keep the Bhagavatam as your constant companion, because the Bhagavatam will give you all the secrets. And so we talked about how many of the stories in the Bhagavatam tell us about the triggers which may create transformation within us. And the more that we can surround ourselves by these triggers, the more our journey can be accelerated. So today we'll try to go through some of these triggers and see how they may relate to you, and then we'll have some discussion. I won't speak too long. I'll keep it quite interactive and see what thoughts you may have. So the first trigger of transformation that we'd like to share with everyone is perhaps the most simple one, the most regular one that all of us engage in. Hearing instructions, hearing knowledge, hearing this transcendental wisdom which can move our consciousness in powerful and significant ways. This is what we do in the Krishna consciousness movement. Once I calculated how many classes I must have sat in my life. It was numbering, I think, if you include recorded classes, over 10,000, maybe more. So many instructions. This is our process, to constantly hear. And hearing is very, very powerful. In the 6th canto, we find this very, very beautiful story of Narad Muni instructing the sons of Prajapati Daksha. The Bhagavatam contains many, many different topics. Atra sargo visargascha stanam poshanamutaya manvantare shanukatha nirodha muktirashraya. So in the 6th canto, Parikshit, at different points in the Bhagavatam, he asks about different things. But in the 6th canto, he begins to ask about Visarga. How was the world populated? What was the process of secondary creation? And so in answer to Parikshit's question, Sukadev Goswami begins to talk about the Prachetas who went into 10,000 years of austerity underwater, and later on the Prachetas gave birth to Prajapati Daksha. And from there he begins to explain how Prajapati Daksha was on a mission. He was a Prajapati, which means a progenitor, a father of mankind, to populate the universe. And so he explains about how Prajapati Daksha had many offspring, but somehow it just wasn't happening. It just wasn't, even in the world today, family planning is a big thing. Having a child requires so much thought, and sometimes there's a lot of complexity surrounding it. So Daksha was having problems. So Daksha, in the end, he decided we have to resort to some prayers here. So he offered the Hamsa Guya prayers, and then he was blessed, and finally he united with his wife, Ashikni. And sure enough, by the blessings of the sages, Daksha had 10,000 sons. But of course, the beginning of life, Brahmachari Gurukule, Vasandanto Guroritam, Acharan Dasavan Nicho, Guru Sudrida Saurida. Before you do anything in this world, Brahmachari Gurukule, you have to begin in the Brahmachari ashram. You have to begin Vasandanta Guroritam. You have to learn how to control your mind, control your senses, otherwise you can't navigate this world. Acharan, you have to understand ideal character. Dasavan, you have to become a servant. Nicho, you have to become very humble. Like this. So the 10,000 sons knew that they had a task for their father to create progeny in the world, but they knew they had to be qualified. And so they went to Narayana Saras, a beautiful setting where they began engaging in austerities, very strictly, with incredible determination. Enter Narad Muni. So Narad Muni sees Narada, one who is giving Narayan to everyone. So therefore a preacher is always looking for someone who is in the zone, someone who is ready, someone who is like dry firewood. That's what the preachers do. They come to the Sunday feast, they kind of have a word with everyone, and then they hone in on the hot prospects. So Narad Muni saw the Haryashvas, all of these sons. And then the Bhagavatam says he began speaking to them enigmatically. This word is used by in Srila Prabhupada's translation. He began delivering instructions. Through a metaphor, he began to explain to them the complexities of material life and how many things can go wrong when you begin engaging with the material energy. And so Narad Muni, he began to give them a different vision. He said, you don't have to go this way. You don't have to get married. You don't have to engage yourself in all the responsibilities of the world. There is another way. There is another option. There is another route. And it's said that by Narad Muni's enigmatic words, by his instructions, by his powerful knowledge, just by the logic, the purity and the Shakti with which Narad Muni was delivering his words, it moved their hearts. It's interesting, Aristotle, he says, in one of his writings, he talks about the power of persuasion, how you persuade someone. And what he says is that the most persuasive speakers have three things: logos, ethos, and pathos. He says the first thing the most powerful persuasive speakers have is logos. What they speak is incredibly logical. You can't find any fault, you can't find any gap, you can't find any doubt in what they say. And then he says the second thing in the most persuasive people is ethos, their ethics, their character. They walk the talk, they live what they seek to share with the world, their life is a demonstration of everything they're speaking. But then he also says, pathos. Most persuasive speakers also have some powerful, persuasive charisma and seeming empowerment and energy, some flair which allows them to reach people's hearts. And so if we look at preachers like Narad Muni, if we were to translate this into a spiritual context, we could say Logos, anyone who speaks Shastra. Because Shastra is the most logical, the most infallible, the most watertight presentation of truth. Ethos, the devotee who has achar, one who is actually sadachar, one who actually has character. And Shakti, pathos, one who is empowered. Krishna Shakti Vinana He Dara Pravartan. Unless you're empowered with Shakti, you can't convince. So because Narad Muni had Shastra, he had Sadachar, and he had Shakti. When he delivered the instructions, it was incredibly powerful. Therefore, he said not just to hear from Shastra, but to hear from a living Bhagavata. Yes, you must read Bhagavatam, but also to hear from the mouth of someone who is a living Bhagavata. This is very, very powerful, because the Bhagavatam says, Tato du sangha mutsrija sadhu satseta buddhiman shanta evasya chindanti mano vyasangam uktibi. That the words of a saintly person are razor sharp. Shanta evasya chindanti mano vyasangam uktibi. And by the words through which they deliver the instructions of Shastra, one's attachments in the mind can be severed. That's the power of a saintly person's instruction. So Narad Muni did it. 10,000 renunciates in one go. It was a good day at the office. Daksha was outraged. 10,000 of my sons, the greatest opportunity I had. Anyway, what to do? Back to the drawing board. Then he had another 1,000 sons, the Savalashvas. And lightning strikes twice. So therefore Narad Muni came again, and with similar enigmatic instructions, he convinced them. Daksha became so angry with Narad Muni that he cursed him, that you will not be able to stay in the same place, you will have to keep moving. For Narad Muni, that was the ideal curse. Inflamed the problem. So therefore, of course, later on Daksha had 60 daughters and he was saved. And he managed to fulfill his task. But here we're beginning to understand from the Bhagavatam how powerful instructions are. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives many, many different metaphors to understand, for us to understand the power of knowledge, the power of Shastra, the power of these instructions that are given to us. Krishna says, Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjita jnana agni karma dagdanam tamahur pandita buddha. Krishna says, one metaphor of knowledge, Arjuna, is that knowledge is like a fire. You see, there are so many reactions that we're due to experience in this world because of our karma from previous activities. But all of that karma can be burned up by the fire of knowledge, because knowledge is so, it can incinerate all of that karma, because all of that karma is meant to educate us. But if we learn that education from the scripture, if we learn that education from hearing, if we install those realizations within our heart just by hearing from a great soul, then that knowledge acts like a fire and it burns up your karma. Therefore, Jnana Agni, karma dagdanam. Later on in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Apiched ashipape bhyo sarve bhyo papa kritama sarvam jnana plaveneva vrijinam santarishashi. Krishna says, knowledge, instruction is not just like a fire, it's like a boat. That knowledge, that instruction can save you from the constant waves of the material world. In this material world, there are constant waves, problems, issues, obstacles, challenges. But when you're situated in the boat of knowledge, then all those waves can never bewilder you. Krishna will say in the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham evanukam partham aham agyana jamtamaha nasayam yatma bhavasto jnana deepena bhashvata. Another metaphor Krishna gives of knowledge is that knowledge is like a lamp. Because we're living in Kali Yuga, in a dark material world, and the tendency is always to become lost, to forget where we're going, to lose sight of the goal, to again become blind to what's really, really important. And therefore Krishna says, dwelling in the heart, I destroy all of that darkness with the lamp of knowledge. And Krishna also says in the Gita, Tasmada jnana sambhutam ritstam jnana sinatmana chitvainam shamshayam yogam atisto tista bharata. That knowledge is also like a sword. Yesterday we talked about doubts, and Krishna says, Arjuna, slash all the doubts which have arisen in your mind, which have arisen within your heart with the sword of knowledge. So can you see how instructions are so powerful? Hearing wisdom, hearing knowledge, hearing Shastra relentlessly, regularly from realized persons can have such a transformative effect on the consciousness. But someone may say, I've been hearing so much. Why is it not happening? I just wanted to share with you a nice reflection from someone. He's a Franciscan monk. His name is Richard Rohr. And very reflective person. And he wrote this, which I thought was very revealing. He said, education, both secular and religious, has for many years given people easy answers to questions they weren't even asking. People accept the answers too quickly, and those answers sink in about an inch deep. This kind of easily won knowledge can pass away as quickly as it came. Why is this? It is knowledge that we did not thirst for or long for. Sometimes we use the easy answers to avoid the real questions. Because we know the answer already, we stop searching. We sit down and remain stationary rather than stepping into the difficult journey of hard-won faith. Most people are no longer on a journey. They've accepted the easy answers because they've struggled to ask or with the deep questions. I thought this was such a profound realization. And basically what he's saying here is that many people hear things. Many people hear from Shastra, they hear from teachers. But the reason why that knowledge doesn't go deep within them and affect their heart in significant ways is because they're not asking questions. Because they're not actually deeply, desperately looking for the answers. If we look at the greatest hearers within our tradition, we see that they were all very, very desperate to find answers. Arjuna was desperate. Therefore, 45 minutes, finished. Done. Because there was such a desperation within the hearer that when the knowledge came, it went deep. Parikshit was desperate to hear. Like this, the kings in the Bhagavatam, the great Raja Rishis, very eager to hear. And here, I find this a very, very powerful realization that oftentimes what's happening is we're hearing a lot, but we're not asking the questions deeply enough within our hearts. And therefore, we kind of get the answers, but the answers don't go very deep. As he says here, this kind of easily won knowledge can pass away as quickly as it came. And therefore sometimes I feel like in preaching, more than giving people answers, what one of our main duties now is to get people to start asking questions. Because sometimes we give people so many answers, but if they're not asking the questions, it doesn't go deep enough. But for us as devotees, the same thing could happen. And therefore, the Bhagavatam is relished by expert and thoughtful persons. Therefore, one has to become very thoughtful. The word quest and question are connected. In other words, if one really wants to go on a quest, then they will ask questions, because questions are what take you on that quest. And so for those who are deeply thoughtful and inquisitive, the instructions can have a powerful effect. So I'm just beginning here today by sharing with you one of the most basic aspects of our philosophy, which is that by continually hearing, many of you have heard me talk about how spiritual knowledge and spiritual learning is cyclical, like a spiral. And we keep reading the same things, we keep looking at the same shastras, and eventually what happens over time is it goes deeper and deeper, and eventually we hone in to the essence. It said that in the beginning, shastra is mainly just information for us. But as we go deeper, then it becomes purification. And then later on it gives us deep conviction. And then later on, deep satisfaction. But this deepening process means we have to go deeper in the method with which we hear instructions and grasp shastric knowledge, and we have to go deeper in our mood. More desperation, more questioning, more real attentive listening with a view to application. And when we do that, then what we find is that over time, this is instruction to create a transformation within our own hearts. So I'm just going to stop here for a second as we just talk about this first trigger of transformation by instruction. Anything you'd like to ask, or if there's any just anything you'd like to share, then we can just have a little bit of a discussion on that first. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. I think that's a very relevant point. How do we generate this questioning attitude? Because often we are there in the lecture and we hear passively. So how can we become more inquisitive ourselves?
Yeah. So how do we actually become more inquisitive? There could be, I guess, many ways to do that. But I think the most important thing is whenever we hear something, the thought should come in our mind that what does this mean for my life? What does this mean for the lifestyle that I've chosen? What does this mean for the decisions that I'm about to make? What does this mean for me, and how does this change my life when I wake up tomorrow morning? And therefore, whenever we absorb knowledge, with a mindset of how this then goes on to change my life and how I act and how I function in this world, then naturally that kind of mindset and that kind of thinking will generate questions. Because then you'll realize I have to change. When we hear knowledge, there should be a sense in which it generates an enthusiasm to change. You see, the job of spiritual instruction is to create a gap between the reality of where we are and the ideal of where we want to be. So when we hear something, the idea is it's meant to create a gap within us. And then the next thing that it's meant to do is meant to make us question, what does this mean for me in terms of making up that gap and reducing that gap? And in the process of reducing that gap, then naturally questions will come. And therefore I think when we try to absorb this knowledge with a view to application, with a view to really changing our life, then naturally we begin to interface with it and question it and explore it in a much deeper way. Is that?
Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
So where will service comes in this process? If I am getting more questions, and is it like from the authorities we will be able to observe the answers or the instructions, or is it with the service we will be able to get the answers? Because initially when we come across many examples where we ask many questions and the authority says to first do the service, then they say like automatically all the answers are, I got the answers from within. So where will service comes in this process?
Yeah. So one of the most famous verses that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would often quote, Ata Shri Krishna Namadi na bhavet grayam indriye sevan mukhe hi jivado svayameva spuratyada. So he would often quote this verse. It was one of his most famous verses, that Krishna's name, fame, form, qualities and pastimes cannot be understood by the blunt material senses, but when they're purified through the process of rendering devotional service, then one becomes qualified. So here when we say transformation by instruction, we're not suggesting that that in itself, in isolation, will do the trick. Of course it can do the trick, because any of the 9 processes of bhakti are powerful enough to change one's consciousness. However, for most of us, we have to do multiple things in order to create the fertile ground for that knowledge to then take root. And therefore it's recommended that along with hearing, along with all of these instructions, that one engage in service. And through that service, one develops a mood of humility. And what does Krishna say? The first quality in the items of knowledge are amanitvam, adambitvam. It all begins with humility. And so, yes, Narad Muni's instructions fell on very fertile hearts, hearts that were humble, hearts that were ideal in character, hearts that were fully able to absorb. But for us, our heart may not be like that, and therefore the acharyas also recommend us to do other activities, to serve, to soften the heart, to become more fertile places for that knowledge to come about. And so yes, service is also very much a part of this. So when we are sharing these triggers, try not to think of them in isolation, but try to think of how you can incorporate more of them alongside everything else you're doing. Does that help? Was that Lokapavani?
Yes, I actually had a similar question, but I asked a lot of questions and then I got a story about that Brahmana who wanted to discuss with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati a lot, and then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told him to go to the pujari and serve there. just said like, please clean the paraphernalia or something like that. And then he did all the services, and then in the end he didn't have any questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Maharaji, you mentioned about the logos, ethos and pathos. So is on the pathos particularly, is it like a skill, or it's a talent, or it's a blessings one is born with? So one should give up, I cannot do this. Because if you go on Harinam or book distribution or whatever, when we have a discussion with anyone, if there is not that persuasiveness, people don't listen to you, no matter like whatever shastric instructions you discuss.
Yeah. Of course, maybe Socrates, he has a certain idea of what that pathos is and what that power of persuasion is. From a spiritual point of view, we understand that that pathos, that power of persuasion, comes from Krishna Shakti. The first two we can do, achar and prachar. In our prachar, we can be very accurate in what we're giving to people. And then in our achar, we can look at our character and work on that and be living examples. But once you've done your achar and prachar, then you need Krishna Shakti, because Krishna Shakti vinana he tara pravartan. You cannot. And therefore that added element for us is the empowerment of Krishna. And therefore the great Vaishnavas, here we are, the whole scenery here is Radha Damodar and Srila Prabhupada, and here we see Srila Prabhupada looking out of his lattice work window, looking at the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami. And why did Srila Prabhupada spend so many years there, 1959 to 1965? Because he understood, unless I am blessed by the power of Rupa Goswami's mercy, how will I be able to fulfill the order of my spiritual master? And therefore the devotees are praying for that empowerment. There was one Hridayananda Babaji who was born in Radha Kund, and he was living at Radha Damodar temple. And he said, in my years of living in Braj, I never saw anyone who was so intense in their bhajan as Bhaktivedanta Swami. And he talks about how one day he overlooked the courtyard in Radha Damodar because he heard someone crying. And Srila Prabhupada was sweeping in front of the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami, saying, "Hey Rupa, hey Sanatan, how will I be able to fulfill the order of my spiritual master? You please bless me." And he was shocked to see how Srila Prabhupada was begging for the empowerment. And so, yes, for us, that added element beyond the logic and the character is the empowerment of Krishna that allows us to reach people's hearts. Yes, Prabhu.
With the pathos, there is also another aspect that you can also train it a little bit. Charisma can be trained, social science tells us. And it's also so wonderful to see how Prabhupada not just prayed for the mercy, but he also, he was always engaged in preaching, and you can also see that with the Sankirtan, that a lot of people were very bad at Sankirtan, but they actually were trained to use the proper lines to do this. And for many it worked, not for me unfortunately, but for many others. And they became really great Sankirtan devotees by training the pathos, by focusing on the person, by using the proper lines.
Yeah, definitely. And Srila Prabhupada wanted, he did that, right? He told the best book distributors to go around and to share how they were speaking to people and how they were meeting. But then Srila Prabhupada also did say that we are not salesmen and this is not a sales technique. And Srila Prabhupada also said that, this is not, just some material formula that we are. There's something deeper. There's the compassion, the desire, the concern of the devotee and Krishna's Shakti behind it, which is moving the whole show. So yes, true. But ultimately that Shakti. Yes. Yes, Hari Pasha Guru.
So, Is it possible that we can go to the previous slide where you put
Yes.
the quote? Yeah. So he's pointing out that many people don't ask the questions and teachers just start giving the solutions. So we see in the Bhagavatam, one of the tasks of the teacher is Vishayo Samshayas-chaiva. The teacher plants the doubt within the heart of the disciple first. Like Sri Vyasadeva knew I am unhappy, but he cannot pinpoint like why I am unhappy. And Narad Muni, before starting to give him instruction, he first asked the question, are you happy identifying with the body and the mind? So the doubt is first planted in the heart of Vyasadeva. And then Narad Muni, in like a needle and out like a plow, he comes out with a solution. Similarly in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, look at all your relatives here assembled in the battlefield. And what he is doing at that point of time is planting the doubt in the heart of the disciple. So actually, effective transformation means people should first be made doubtful and then they will appreciate the solution. So that is one of the techniques which previous acharyas use. First you plant the doubt and then you give the solution.
Yeah.
Then the student appreciates it a lot.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yes, so much. It has to begin with some confusion. Like nowadays in the world, people don't like confusion, they don't like doubt. People try to avoid existential confusion because they think existential confusion will bring existential crisis. But existential confusion can also bring existential awakening. It just depends how one deals with that confusion. But in the world today, people are so much avoiding that. Therefore, whenever there's any kind of confusion or doubt, they immediately just try to forget about it. But those who go on the spiritual path, when they have doubt, when they have confusion, they face it, they explore it. And with the right guidance and wisdom, they use that doubt and confusion and then transform it into an awakening. So yes, so much of what we do. Actually, Srila Prabhupada said the whole purpose of Bhaktivedanta Institute, the scientific, he said, your main job is just to plant the seed of doubt in people. That what they've accepted, what they've been doing, how they've been living, how they've, what worldview they've had, you need to put a doubt in that. And from there it can go further. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, maybe one last one, then we'll move on. Yeah.
Raj, I had a question relating to this quote. And we observe how Richard Rohr talks about not to mindlessly accept, but also reflect and deeply question what we are hearing. And it's just something, it's not even maybe a properly formed question, but I was just reflecting on my way of hearing, and sometimes I see that I have some lectures on where I just for the sake of being absorbed, I'm just hearing. I'm doing something else, but I'm hearing. And then when I read this, I realize I'm mindlessly hearing actually. Because I'm in this mode of acceptance, just like hearing what's going on, what the speaker is saying, what Srila Prabhupada is saying. And sometimes I'm so alert that I pick on something and I reflect on it. But mostly I'm just mindlessly hearing. So what would be your, how would you address this, that this sometimes, and to be honest, I don't feel it's entirely bad, because I try with the intention to be absorbed. But at the same time, I'm not really reflecting on it.
Of course, to keep the transcendental sound vibration going in our life is very nice. Even when one is only hearing, while doing something else, still one may pick up seeds of transcendental thought that may nourish and inspire their heart. I think just as we make sure, as long as we make sure that we don't make that the habit, that kind of attitude towards hearing doesn't become the modus operandi, but that we do have quality hearing, that when we sit down, we really sit like the Bhagavad, in the Bhagavad Mahatmyam, different examples are given of the superior listener. And one of the examples is given as the fish who doesn't blink and just remains completely attentive to hear. That kind of quality of attention, quality of presence, quality of connection with the subject matter, as long as we're not losing that in those focused times when we're hearing, then I think having transcendental sound vibration in the back, catching something, is still nice. But yes, there must be quality. It's real. Hearing Bhagavatam is a real culture. When you go to some places, you see how much of a culture there is around hearing Bhagavatam. How the atmosphere, the room, the way people behave when a Bhagavatam class is going on, the things that will be done, won't be done, is very, very strict. Because hearing is it's deity worship. Because the Bhagavatam is the deity. And just as when we are on the altar, there's a very, very strict way in which we interact with Krishna, and not just anyone can go there and do anything. Similarly, when we're hearing Bhagavatam, it's very strict. It's a whole culture. And in many of our places, many of our great teachers, for example, His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj created such an amazing culture of how to hear Bhagavatam. I mean, the first hour of his class was only glorification of the Bhagavatam. And then we can go on and speak subject matter. And how he trained his disciples and those who were following him to hear very, very attentively is a beautiful culture. So yeah, as long as we are also inculcating that seriousness. It's okay. All right, I'll move on and then we'll open up again for us. Are we going to 9:30? Yeah. Okay, so we talked about transformation by instruction. Another beautiful trigger of transformation that we're hearing about in the Bhagavatam is transformation by issue. And here we learn of the incredible story of Chitraketu. This is a very, very beautiful realization that Chitraketu has, and you can see later on how he comes to this incredible realization. You can repeat after me. Guna pravaha etasmin kasapa ko nanugraha kasvargo naraka ko va kim sukham dukham eva va. So this is, after going through his whole journey, this is Chitraketu's realizations of life. The material world resembles the waves of a constantly flowing river. Therefore, what is a curse and what is a favor? What are the heavenly planets and what are the hellish planets? What is actually happiness and what is actually distress? Because the waves flow constantly, none of them has an eternal effect. It's a very powerful realization. If there's anyone in the Bhagavatam who had ups and downs in their life, it was Chitraketu. It was really a roller coaster story. You know, like Chitraketu has, I think is it 10 million wives? I think 10 million wives, yeah. We won't, anyway, whatever it was. He had everything. He had beautiful wives, he had palaces, he had all the opulence, he had all the facility he was looking for. I mean, he was on a real high. But then, despite all of that around him, there was something missing. And it wasn't just something small, it was something important. He never had a son. And for a king to have a son is just not just a personal desire, personal exchange of love that someone wants to give from their heart, but it's also completely essential to continue the lineage. So despite everything, again plunged into distress because no son. But later on Angira Rishi comes, and Angira Rishi tells him, no, if you do this yagya, you do this, then everything will come. And like that, later on he's blessed by the mercy of Angira Rishi with the son. But then as soon as he receives that benediction, then later on he hears from the same Rishi, but your son will be Harsha Shoka, the cause of great happiness, but also the cause of great lamentation. Again, Chitraketu plunged into distress. Somehow or other he learns to blank it out. The son is born, and the son brings great happiness to his life, and it's very, very beautiful, and everything is going wonderful. After his wife Kritadyuti gives birth to that son. But then later on what happens? All the co-wives become envious, and then they kill that son. And then again Chitraketu is plunged into distress. But then what happens? Angira Rishi and Narad Muni come, and as they come, they begin to give him incredible spiritual instruction. They even revive the son, and the son begins to give him spiritual instruction. And not just that, they give him a mantra. They give him a mantra of spiritual empowerment by which he can connect with the Lord, with Lord Shesha. And by chanting that mantra and receiving that instruction, he comes out again, realized in his position, comes out of his lamentation. And then later on what happens is, as he's walking, he sees Shiva and Parvati, and accidentally reacts in such a way to cause Parvati some disdain against him, and then she curses him to become a demon, again become a demon down. But then he comes back as a demon, as Vitrasura, and then later on he faces the Lord and receives the benediction of the Lord. So now you can see how many ups and downs there were in Chitraketu's life. And therefore when you hear this realization, the material world resembles the waves of a constantly flowing river. What is a curse and what is a favor? What are the heavenly planets and what are the hellish planets? What is happiness and what is distress? Everything is flowing constantly, and none of them has an eternal effect. So you can see how his life brought him to this realization that yes, we know the way the Lord speeds up our advancement in this world, our transformation, is by sending problems, by sending ups and downs, by sending issues. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would often give this story of the wedding party. The newly married couple who were on the boat, and who then boarded the boat, and in the moonlit sky they began rowing straight into the horizon of the sea. And after rowing and rowing all night, as the sun rose in the morning and they looked at their surroundings, they realized they were in exactly the same place. Why? Because they were on the river, there was a beautiful boat, but what happened? There was an anchor. And the anchor was down. And therefore, because the anchor was down, then therefore they rowed and rowed and rowed, but they just went around and round and around in circles. And therefore sometimes when something is stuck in, what do you have to do? You have to go like this. You have to shake it out. Up and down, 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 and then boom. Then you can take it out. So all the issues, all these ups and downs, all these difficulties that Krishna sends are like the ups and downs, that shaking, to basically remove the anchor of the attachments that are causing us to just go round and round in circles. And so this transformation by issue, this transformation by creating all these intrigues and all these twists and turns and all these unexpected things and all these situations that we wish we didn't have to deal with, all of this is part of Krishna's plan to basically jolt our attachments, which are stopping our progress in Krishna consciousness. So they say we can't, but we can make the decision to stand under Krishna. So we can't always understand Krishna and why he's sending things, but every time he sends things, stand under Krishna when we can't understand Krishna. And this is how the Lord speeds up our journey. Just like, here's an experiment. Here there are two tracks. The straight track and the up and down track. And which track do you think is going to be the faster track? This is basically life. That sometimes we want the smooth road, we want the straight road, we want the shortest road. But what we don't realize is that the up and down road, the difficulties, even if they increase to this much, actually are Krishna's amazing plan to speed up our progress to him. But still we continuously ask for the we always want the straight path. We expect the straight path. We think the straight path is Krishna's mercy. And we think the ups and downs are Krishna's neglect. But this is transformation by issue. These simple things we hear again and again. What I'm sharing with you is not that you've not heard before. We've all heard this before. But still we can't accept it. We can't... There was a mother and her son. And the mother, every time there would be a difficulty in life, the son would observe how the mother would come in front of Krishna and offer very, very sincere prayer. And then she would come back, and then there would be another difficulty, another obstacle. And then the mother would come to Krishna and offer a prayer. And then there would be another difficulty and an obstacle, and she would come and offer the prayer. And then the son said to the mother, "What's the point? Every time you're going, there's a difficulty, why pray to Krishna? It just doesn't work." She said, "Follow me." And so the son followed her, and they came in front of Krishna. And this time the son heard her prayer, and she looked at Krishna and she said, "Just as throughout my life you've given me the strength to deal with all these obstacles and not allow it to affect my faith, now today give me the strength to not allow the words of my son to affect my faith in you." And then the son realized, oh, every time she went to Krishna, she didn't ask Krishna to change the situation. She didn't ask Krishna to solve the situation. She didn't ask Krishna for a solution. But what she asked Krishna for was the strength, the wisdom, the heart to accept every single one of Krishna's plans as something that is a beautiful, ingenious master plan to speed up my journey towards him. And so through the life of Chitraketu, through the life of these ups and downs, these obstacles that we go through, we realize that without issue, without these things, our journey to Krishna would be very, very slow. And therefore another huge trigger of transformation is the ability to utilize the difficulties that we encounter and the obstacles and all of these ups and downs in such a way that they will speed up and ignite our desire to again be with Krishna. So here, one by one, we're kind of just looking at different ways in which we can speed up our journey to Krishna. I think we have about 10 minutes, so let me stop here. Hopefully tomorrow we'll see some other triggers that are there. But just for these last few minutes before breakfast, just to see whether there's anything here that anyone would like to raise or ask. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. By speaking about ups and downs, I remember the talk by His Grace Hari Parashad Prabhu. He was explaining how Jiva Goswami, after he understood when Vallabhabhata was wrongly understanding Rupa Goswami was angry on Jiva Goswami and sent him from Vrindavan. And Hari Parashad Prabhu said that when Jiva Goswami, he was allowed to come back because he understood what he did wrong. Maybe in this connection, so we go down, but how we come back? Do we really have to understand it? Because sometimes so many things happen.
So your question, I don't quite understand the question.
Is it like Jiva Goswami was, Rupa Goswami said he is allowed to come back to Vrindavan because he understood what he did wrong.
Okay.
So is it always when we go down, we have to understand so that we can go up again?
Yeah. So I think this is a situation in which Rupa Goswami wanted to teach the world something through Jiva Goswami. Of course, there was no fault in what Jiva Goswami had done. Jiva Goswami was defending the reputation of his revered spiritual master, but still Rupa Goswami wanted to teach through him that one must be very cautious of pride and so on and so forth. So yes, definitely sometimes Krishna will send us an issue because there's a lesson that we need to learn from it in terms of how to change our character or change our approach. And therefore, when we go through that difficulty, we digest the lesson, we reform our character and we emerge again, then it's almost like that coming up again, which then helps us to kind of re-enter the journey of bhakti in a more powerful way. But sometimes we can also see that Krishna may just send us difficulties not because we did anything wrong, just because that's just another facet of his mercy. Srila Prabhupada said, Krishna tested me in two ways. First, he took away everything, and then he gave me everything. So Srila Prabhupada also, Krishna took away many things. He was in Vrindavan in 1959, stripped. He said, I'm crying alone in the wilderness, I'm a lone mendicant. Krishna has shown me the naked form of the material energy. Today, by his grace, everything has become tasteless to me. All that is left of my family life is a long list of names. So Krishna sent him through that very, we can say, difficult period. That was also Krishna's grace, Prabhupada said. Yasyaham anugrinami harishye tad dhanam shane tato dhanam tejantasya svajana dukhadukitam. The Bhagavatam tells us when Krishna especially gives his mercy, then he may take many things away. So also sometimes just the difficulties that we go through are not necessarily because we need to learn a lesson, but it's just Krishna's loving hand bringing us towards Him and shaking us out of anything that may still be rooting us to this world. So, some thoughts.
Maharaj, I don't mind ups and downs. Whatever has to come, will come. But I need a guarantee that these ups and downs, downs, are arranged by Krishna. I am just thinking that it's just my karma, or that it's downs are just made by me, and that's a little devastating, But if I knew, if I would have like written guarantee, or, it's coming from Krishna, even if I don't understand why, even just, okay, I suffer because, and I will learn my lesson, then I will be peaceful, and I will have some hope, and okay, let's do that. And I need this guarantee.
We'll put in the request for you.
Addition. But, the answer, I also already talked with the devotees about that, even some Maharajas, and they will say, but you're Krishna devotee, of course, and this answer is not working with me,
Oh wow, I was going to give that answer as well. Well, it's said, maybe Hari Parshad Prabhu may know some praman for this, but we often say that, yes Prabhu, well you speak first, I think. Yes, you should speak.
I've just been put into a new program. Let's say the problem that we've been put into is not arranged by Krishna. Yeah, it is not arranged by Krishna. It is arranged by our previous karma. Still, there is a way to ensure that Krishna stays in the equation and takes a very prominent place in the equation, even if it is arranged by our previous karma. In the 10th canto, 14th chapter, I think it's verse number 8, Brahma gives a solution, Sri Brahma gives a solution for all sorts of problems that are there in the material world. I will recite the verse. Tattenu kampam susamikshamano
Bunjana evatma kritam vipakam Ridvagvapurbir vidata namaste Jiveta yomukti pade sadaya bhak.
The second line says Bhunjana eva atma kritam vipakam. When one is suffering because something wrong has happened, we try to do samiksha. Samiksha means we try to investigate who is the cause of this particular problem. And then I may say, well, this Prabhu is the cause of my problem. Or this Prabhu is the cause of my problem. This is samiksha. Susamiksha. But after a lot of mature investigation, we find out that actually the cause of the problem is myself. Previously, I have wronged somebody. Otherwise, it cannot come to me. This problem cannot come to me. Yatha dhenu sahasreshu vatso vindati mataram. Tatha purva kritam karma kartaram anugacchati. Just as a calf is able to find its mother from 1,000,000 cows, similarly karma finds its recipient amongst 1,000,000 people. So why did this come to me? The seed of this is somewhere in the past. Susamikshamana. After very careful investigation, I found out that I have done something wrong in the past. Therefore, tatte anukampam. this is where Krishna gets involved. It is actually his mercy that he allowed me to fall into this particular situation. Otherwise, I would have never learned. Never ever learned. So when I am receiving the negative reactions, Atmakritam, I have done something in the past. I have wronged some living entity in the past. What should I do now? Understand that it is Bhagwan's arrangement, even though it is coming from my previous karma. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says there are 5 agents of activity, the final one being Daiva. Unless he sanctions it, no negative reaction can come to us. So he sanctioned it, therefore it has come to us. And now what am I supposed to do? Rid Vag Vapuvi, through my heart, through my words, through my body. I pay my obeisances to Krishna and I say, Krishna, I accept whatever you have given me, this negative reaction, without any grudge whatsoever in my heart. Jivet, one who simply lives in this way, just simply lives in this way. Mukti Padesa Daya Bhag. Liberation he gets in inheritance. Liberation is his inheritance. Daya Bhag means inheritance. He receives liberation as inheritance. Natural inheritance. A son just has to stay alive to receive inheritance from the father. But while staying alive in a non-grudging manner and pay your obeisances to the father. So that is what is indicated here. Even if it is by our previous karma, it was Krishna who said yes, let him suffer. Otherwise, it would not have come to us. So Bhagavan is, in Vedic philosophy, Bhagavan is also responsible for our suffering because he allows it to happen. This is where Krishna was involved, even though it has come from your previous karma, our previous karma. But there is a way we can respond. We can disarm Bhagavan. So this is what the Gaudiya Vaishnava does. Every time he disarms Bhagavan by saying, alright, Krishna is checking what reaction do you have. Whom are you blaming this? I am not blaming anybody. I will accept it as it is. And I will still remain favorable to you. So that is when Krishna says, well, Krishna fails the test. The devotee passes the test. And that is the expertise of the devotee. To make sure that Krishna fails, not we. So I think that is the answer to your query.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Yes. Maybe this will be the final question. And then
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for triggering us these past days. There are so many processes happening. I was just, after your presentation yesterday, also Hari Parshad said how scriptures are always the same, but how every generation has its own issues to deal with. And now somehow when we were speaking of all these things, I feel how our generation has been raised through schools, through many things we go through, how life path is linear and we have to go from A to B to C and we want to have it all figured out until we are 25 latest and we know the life. And I wonder, is it also now connected to what Goranandini was asking also, is it also connected that all these issues and everything that comes in our lives, is it the only purpose of all of these things, is it actually to make us vulnerable? Because if we have it all figured out and we are 20 or whatever, then what are the questions to be asked and what are the experiences to go through? And I personally feel this in my life, that the only things that are shifting is that I allow myself to be vulnerable and to feel it as a strength, opposite to a weakness, what the whole society and everything is teaching us while growing up. Yeah. So I wanted to ask for your illumination and any thoughts on this.
Yeah, definitely. It seems The plan of most people in the material world is to try to become comfortable, to try to become secure, to try to become safe, to try to create a situation around them in which everything is under their control. And therefore, Krishna says, Ishvaroham aham bhogi siddhoham balavan sukhi. That deep within us there is this desire to be the Ishvara Bhav, to be the controller, to be the one upon whom everything rests. And so if one has Ishvara Bhav, how can one ever taste the real bliss of being a servant? How can one ever really submit themselves in a relationship of loving service? And so the whole purpose of the material world is to frustrate the desire of the living entity who is rooted in Ishvara Bhav. And the most pertinent and powerful way to remove the Ishvara Bhav is to thrust things upon the living entity which clearly help us to realize, I'm not in control. And when we realize that, then as Draupadi did, who just put her hands up and said, Govinda, save me, then we can really surrender. So we have this tendency to always slip back into Ishvara Bhav. Like there's the story of the man who was going for an interview and somehow or other he was very, very late, so he was struggling to find a car parking space. So he was praying, God, I want to find a parking space, So he was praying profusely, and then he turned the corner and sure enough there was a parking space, and he looked up and he said, don't worry God, I found one. So there's this sense in which we always keep slipping back into this Ishvara Bhav, thinking that is, I'm arranging it, I'm controlling it, I'm the one. So what the material world does is it puts us through all these ups and downs, and we realize, once we were having a debate in the Brahmacharya ashram about whether football is a bona fide sport. These are deep theological issues we have to grapple with. So everyone got the Veda base out, so we were all such an Acharya base, bring it all out. Anyway, someone came with a nice quote by Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, life is like a game of football. But you think you're the player, but actually you're the football. And that's what we come to at a certain point. We come to that realization that I'm being kicked around. But it's okay. Krishna is there. Krishna is moving everything. So yeah, somehow or other to come out of that Ishvara Bhav, to become vulnerable, as you said, and to let go and to let God. This is Krishna consciousness. Easier said than done. Thank you. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Today is the last full day of the retreat. We are slowly coming to the closure, but today there is really plenty opportunity to go into immersion. Today we have a very, very packed schedule. We will start at 11 o'clock with Haripasha Prabhu, and this time Haripasha Prabhu will need to stop at 1 o'clock. And then at 1 o'clock we will have our Sunday Feast program. We have every Sunday some guests coming to our temple, so we decided to keep the Sunday Feast program into the festival. But we will readjust. Instead of having the bhajan in the afternoon with Shyamananda, there will be 1 hour of bhajan from 1 to 2, also with Shyamananda. And then Swayam Bhagavan Keshava Maharaj will give the Sunday Feast lecture, and the lunch will be actually later. The lunch will be at 3 o'clock. So you might like to take a little bit more breakfast this morning so you can pace yourself nicely. This Sunday Feast program is something optional. I mean, if you have spiritual body and you can follow everything today is fine. But if you don't, please pace yourself because we will need all of you ready at 4:30 for the question and answer session. So please pace yourself nicely. And thank you, Maharaj, for bringing this point of having like real questions, deep questions. So you have like few hours in front of you to a little bit reflect of what are the most important questions you will need answer from. We will have Swami Bhagavan, Keshava Maharaj, Sacinandana Swami and Hari Parshat here answering all the questions. And if you are shy, you can write it down and you can have it then here and you can from time to time pick some of the questions out. So I think that's more or less all. In case you want to keep a memory from the festival, we have few of those wonderful t-shirts in the temple shop. There are maybe some of you have lost things. I have one watch here. I have one ring. So please do not lose all your belongings. The only things you can lose here is your heart. I just went through the kitchen this morning and I was stunned to see like the whole Swiss yatra was in the kitchen preparing a wonderful breakfast. So please all go to the tent, have a wonderful breakfast, and yeah, pace yourself today. It's a little bit more packed. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.